This is managing questionnaire data in SPSS. For this workshop, it's really useful for you to have examples that you've seen before. So what I'm going to get you to do is stop the video and just briefly look at these 3 questionnaires, and then we'll come back to the questions in these questionnaires throughout the workshop, so you'll understand what we're talking about if you've looked at these questionnaires already. So the first one, there's a link. If you go to the VLE Maths Skills Centre where you're watching this video, the slides are there and you can use the slides to get the link. The first one will link to a Qualitrics survey. It is only for the purposes of this workshop, so if you want to fill it in and submit it, you can make up the answers, it's up to you. The second survey I want you to look at is on academic motivation, and it's on Google Forms. So we've got Likert scale style questions there. And then the third survey, I've done it as if you've just got a survey which is in a Word document or a Google Doc, because you're going out talking to people face to face. So again, you can have a look at that. You can do them. You can find what you like about them, what's easy about them, which might help you when you come to do your own questionnaire. So you can stop the video now and just take 5 minutes to look at those. This video is going to show you how to get the data into SPSS from Qualitrics, Google Forms, or from an Excel spreadsheet. There'll be other videos on these other topics on the screen now. And it's worth mentioning that if you follow this link, which you can get to again from the VLE slides here, then you'll be able to access digital skills training. Sometimes they do workshops on introduction to NVivo. Sometimes they do workshops on making questionnaires in Google Forms. So let's get some data into SPSS. The big mistake people make is by putting in summary data, somehow thinking that the summary data that Qualitrics and Google Forms gives you is the data that you need. It's not. You want what we call the raw data from the questionnaire. So I'm going to show you how to get data from Qualitrics, then Google Forms, and then Excel. First of all, I'm going to tell you how you would get the data from Qualitrics. Now, I'm going to go into my own Qualitrics account. To do that, I would go to the university homepage and type in Qualitrics. And that's because I want to sign into Qualitrics through my university account, because the university has a license. I would enter my own username and my usual password. If you're entering Qualitrics for the first time, you'll need to set up an account, but you use your usual IT username and password. If you want to learn how to use Qualitrics, go to Create New Project in the top right here. Then scroll down to the bottom where you have to learn Qualitrics templates, and they can be really useful. These are all my questionnaires. I want to go to the questionnaire Attitudes to Electric Cars that you've just been looking at. And what you'll notice is that if you click on Reports, then you get a summary of each question. So it gives you bar graphs and tables which summarize the data nicely. This is what I'm talking about. You don't want this summary data. That's not useful to you. You want the raw data. To get the raw data out of Qualitrics, go to Data and Analysis, Export and Import, and Export Data. And then you've got an option. You can export it to Excel or CSV. I'm going to recommend you export it straight to SPSS and click Download. And it will download it to the bottom left here. Click and press Open. And there it's saved to your computer a .sav file. .sav files are the data files for SPSS. So now when we open that up, we've got the data in SPSS. So now I'm going to extract the data from a Google form, so from this survey here that you just looked at. I'm going to go to my account, and if you click on responses, you'll see that you get again these nice summary graphs of each question. Again, that's not useful to you. You want to get the raw data. So to do that, click on this View Responses in Sheets, and it'll create a Google Sheet with all the raw data in it for you. Then to get that into SPSS, it's just a case of highlighting it and copy and pasting. In SPSS, I right click and I want to choose Paste with Variable Names, and that will put the column headings up the top. What you might notice looking at this dataset when you get it into SPSS is that all these questions where we've got a 1 or a 7, we've got text in as well. And that means that SPSS is treating this data as string data. There's a little A letter there. We don't really want that. And that's because we've sort of made a mistake when we did the questionnaire. We had it so that 1 does not correspond to all, 7 corresponds exactly. So if I'd made that mistake and I'd realised before I started collecting data, I might want to go back to my survey and sort of rearrange it. So just now, my survey looks like this. We've got letters next to 1 and 7. I might want to redesign my survey so that I put the text in the box at the top and then I just have a number. That means that when I extract the data from this version 2 survey, I get the numbers without the text beside them. So let's highlight that, copy, go to SPSS, let's get a clean data sheet and paste that in using the same right click and paste with variable names. And now SPSS has accepted that data in a bit better format. The final questionnaire that I got you to look at was the salary study, which we were pretending we were doing face-to-face. So in this case, you would collect the data and then you'd probably put it into either Google Forms or Excel. So you would have it a little bit like this, put into Excel. It's very similar to what we've just done. We're just going to copy, we're just going to highlight that, copy it all. And then in SPSS, we're going to create a new data set and we're going to right click and copy with variable names again to get that in there like that. What you might notice is that we had this question at the end which asked people why would they ask for a pay rise. Now that's not copied into SPSS very well. So the reason that's happened is because we've got this question, why would you ask for a pay rise? And you can see here that there's several answers that they could put and they could tick all that applies. So that means when we've coded it into Excel, we've just put this person has good job, underpaid UK, but this person has chosen 2 options and we've just put them in the same cell. SPSS is going to struggle to analyse the data like that. The correct way to code that data is to take a column per option of that question. So anyone who chose the option good job, they've got a 1 there. Anyone who chose the option underpaid, they've got a 1 there. You can see this person here, they chose underpaid and because they like the money, so they get a 1 there. That's the best way of coding it up. So what we can do is let's just add that into our SPSS worksheet by copying it and going back to the SPSS worksheet. It's going to be able to do something with that data now. Now that we've got our data in, we're going to have to sort of set the data up. Some people call this cleaning the data, and we usually need to do some sort of sorting like this before we can actually do the analysis. So the sorts of things I'm talking about are adding labels or setting values, setting measures in the variable view in SPSS. Or we might want to remove respondents that we don't want to include in our analysis. So I'm going to demonstrate how you would do those sorts of things now. Let's start with the survey that we exported from Qualitrics. You can see Qualitrics includes a lot of, I call this rubbish really, just when people took the survey and their IP address and what language it was taken in. What I tend to do, because I find that distracting, is remove it all. So I highlight, go to edit and clear. And that gets rid of it all, and now I've just got my survey answers. If I go to variable view, I can notice some things about this data because it's been exported from Qualitrics. The best thing about exporting from Qualitrics is that it uses the question number for the name and then it puts the full question under label. If you export it to Excel and then copy it into SPSS, it won't do that. And that saves you a job. The other really nice thing about using Qualitrics and putting it into SPSS is that you've got the values. So we've got what 1 to 5 means. We don't need to spend time putting all that in. The other thing we've got here is measure. However, Qualitrics doesn't always get the measure correct. So for example, this I might treat as scale, but let's say, do you currently own a car? The answer to that was yes or no. So I wouldn't say that's scale, that's more nominal, and the type of car, that's nominal as well. So I'd have to do a little bit of work adjusting these. For the academic motivation questionnaire, I'm going to have to do a bit more cleaning of the data in SPSS. So this is my academic motivation in SPSS. Again, I've got a timestamp and a score. I don't really care about those. I find them distracting. I'm going to delete them. So go to edit and clear after you've highlighted them. Then in variable view, unfortunately, you'll notice that the name and the label is the exact same. It's just taken the text from the Google form. And that might not be helpful. So you probably want to spend some time shortening the name to something that's going to be easier to interpret when you're analysing. And then all these questions here, you probably want to go through and delete the text which is beforehand, because that doesn't really mean anything until you get to the end of it. So that might take you a bit of time doing that. You might notice that we don't have values here for any of them, unlike when we imported data from Qualitrics. So again, it's another reason why you might consider using Qualitrics over Google Forms. And again, it has a guess at what the measure is, but we'd have to go through putting the measure in for all of these. Now let's look at the salary study and how we would clean that up in SPSS. So here's our data. One of the things we could do is reduce these decimal places because it's quite hard to view this data. We do that in the variable view and just click down to reduce that to 0. Then when we go back to data view, you can appreciate that that looks a bit tidier. It's easier to look at. Notice again that the name and the label are the same, just like when we exported data from Google Forms. So again, you might want to spend some time putting in the full question because it might help you remember and interpret the analysis later on. Again, we don't have any values here. So for instance, for sex, we have 1s and 2s, but we don't actually know what they mean. So we have to spend a bit of time putting in 1 means female, 2 means male, and then we'd have to do that for all these other questions as well, which might take us some time. And again, we don't have the measures put in, so we'd have to decide which type of data each of these were. The other thing I want to do with this before I analyse it is get rid of some of the participants who didn't complete the survey. So that might be maybe because they're students or they've not had a salary. To do that, I'm going to go to data and select cases. So I'm going to select the cases that I want and exclude the ones that I don't want. Click on if condition is satisfied and if. And then there's quite a few different ways you can do this. I'm just going to mention one of them, which is a function called nmiss. So to get a function, I've clicked on all under the function group, and these are all in alphabetical order. So I'm going to scroll down to nmiss, double click, and it goes into the formula box. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to use my salary question. And I'm going to say that if the number of pieces of data missing from there is equal to 0, i.e. there's something in the box, then I want to select it. So continue and OK. I appreciate that's a bit hard to get your head around. When I go back to the data, you'll see that there's score throughs here for the ones that I don't want in my analysis. And depending on the analysis in SPSS, it is likely not to include it, but there are some exceptions to that.